It's an era of change, of ideals and cultures constantly colliding. We need brave people who will find the way of hope in the chaos, who will elevate truth in their speech and activate reform in their lives. Lee Sloan welcomes you to this Brave Nation.
Hi, I'm Lee Sloan, and today I am honored to introduce you to a freedom fighter who has made history starting back in the 1990s. She's actually had a movie made about her life called Miss Virginia, and she wrote a book about her experiences called School Choice, A Legacy to Keep. Her full name is Virginia Walden Ford. She was a low-income single mother in Washington, D.C. when she saw educational injustice right where she lived. She was concerned, deeply concerned, that her son was in danger of being lost to the gangs or to the drug culture around him if she didn't do something fast. And so she mustered her courage and her faith to rise up and fight. She raised up an army of thousands of parents who fought to open up educational funding for low-income kids in Washington, D.C. who needed better options. And they actually succeeded. They saw the first school choice reforms that were unprecedented in the history of Washington, D.C. Now, I realize that school choice may or may not be your thing. It is National School Choice Month and week this coming up here pretty soon in January, but I want you to listen anyway, even if school choice isn't your thing. And I want you to be inspired by this story of one courageous person and how her life created a wave of significant cultural reform. It just might inspire you to do the same thing in your sphere with the problem that you were made to solve. Let's dive in. Well, hello, Brave Nation. I am very excited about our special guest today that we have on the show. She is, when we talk about Brave Nation and shifting culture, we talk a lot about shifting culture and creating significant cultural reform. Well, this woman has done it. She is very brave indeed. Her name is, what she's affectionately known as, is Miss Virginia. And did they also call you the school choice lady?
Oh yeah.
Here comes
Yeah.
the school choice lady. And so her full name is Virginia Walden Ford. And I had the honor of meeting Miss Virginia at the National School Choice Summit this past year. And when I heard her story, I immediately wanted to share it with you here at Brave Nation. And you know that it's significant what she's done when they make a movie about your life. And they have made a movie about her life. It's called Miss Virginia. And I did watch the movie, but I have to say, if I compare watching the movie, which it was a well-made movie, but to reading your book, the book is way more interesting to me. Fascinating because it gets into the backstory of your history and, generations in education, really. And also what happened with your son, which was amazing. So, she's been honored by presidents, and now we're honored to have her on Brave Nation today. So welcome to Brave Nation, Miss Virginia.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted.
Yeah, and I can't wait to launch into your story. We are celebrating National School Choice Week, the month of January. And so I want to pull out her book. So just so if you want to read more of it, it's called School Choice, A Legacy to Keep. This is a great book that you should get to read. I read it on the plane when I was coming home from the school choice event, and it made me cry. So when I got to a
Oh.
certain point in it, which I will tell you what that is in a little bit as we get to it. So let's talk about your history with your family. Um, you have quite a history with education, and tell us how you grew up.
Okay, I am one of five girls, and I grew up with parents who were teachers. My mom taught fourth grade for a million years. My dad was an elementary school principal and teacher who eventually became the assistant superintendent of the Little Rock School District. My mom, the first black assistant superintendent. My mom was one of four teachers that integrated um, public schools here in Little Rock. And so all I ever heard growing up was getting an education. Funny story is when I was about six, these boys would be at the house and they would be doing their homework with my dad. So I thought I had brothers, and my because they would call my dad daddy or dad. And so I would tell people I have a lot of brothers. And one day my mom said, "Honey, you have only sisters, and those are not our biological children. They're children that we help."
Yeah.
I was so confused, and I wanted brothers really bad. But so it's always been where my parents were involved in educating children, whether it be through school or at our home or through the church. And so every one of us, the five of us, were, destined to go forward and help children and do something. My degree is in accounting,
Mm.
and so I always thought, okay, they can teach school and not make a lot of money. I'm gonna make some money, but it wasn't meant to be. It was meant to for me to work on behalf of children,
Mm.
and I got it. I understood it. So
Yeah.
in the '90s, when my own children were having struggles in school, I decided that more needed to be done,
Mm.
and talking to other parents and hearing that they were having difficulties with their children in school, it
Mhm.
became a quest of mine. It was okay, I got to do something to help,
Right.
and that launched DC Parent for School choice in the '90s,
Mhm.
which led to everything that happened later.
Yeah. So you were one of the first students to be integrated into the schools in the South, is that right?
Yes, well, in 1957, the Little Rock Nine, the infamous Little Rock Nine, the one everybody hears about, went into Central, and it was terrible. The governor brought out the Arkansas National Guard to prevent them from coming into schools, and then the president of the United States, who was President Eisenhower, sent in federal guards to escort them to classes.
Right.
So it was really tough. I was a little girl then, but 10 years later, when I entered high school, we went to Central. I mean, I remember my dad coming home and going, "All right, you and your twin, I have a twin, and
Mhm.
your twin are going to Central." And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm going to the black high school." And Daddy was like, "You don't have a choice. You going to Central." And
Mm.
I remember I was so troubled by that because we had seen all the things that happened, and not that many black kids went to Central after '57. It was just too many emotional struggles.
Right.
So the first day of school, 10th grade, Daddy took us to school, and I guess I was looking mean or mad or whatever, and he said, "Jenny," because that's what they call me, Jenny.
Mhm.
He said, "You have a responsibility to go to Central and do well.
Mm.
You have younger siblings, and if you don't go to Central and do well, and then they will be impacted.
Mhm.
So you need to think about that." I'm telling you, it stayed with me till now, you
Mm.
know,
Right.
because I think I did have a responsibility. So I went to Central, and it was a struggle. It was hard because we're talking about the '60s,
Right.
and it was still a lot of, turmoil in the South, and
Mhm.
and but I went to Central and I did my best. And I looked at my two little sisters and I thought they will do better, and
Mhm.
they did.
Right. Yeah, those early school experiences I think really shape us. And
Oh, I do too.
I went to a really rough public school when I was a kid in Los Angeles, California, and it really set me up for what I'm doing now with school choice because I just saw the injustice and I suffered under that in a way. But then you also realize the strength that you have inside you, and you
Yes.
just pull it out. And I love how your parents showed you that you're a leader. Sorry, you don't get a
Yeah.
pass. You have to be a leader, and that's
Yes.
what your destiny is. And I think you kind of knew that as you grew up and as you had kids of your own, you were like, you weren't going to take no for an answer. You weren't going
No.
to say, you weren't going to put your kid's life on the line just because people said we're not ready to change anything yet.
Exactly. And I was divorced young. I was a single mother raising three kids in Washington D.C. Two of my kids, my two oldest kids, were pretty much self starters,
Right.
and they did well. They
Mhm.
did okay in often some really bad situations. And they found mentors and they
Mhm.
talked to me a lot. But my youngest son really struggled.
Mm.
And he wouldn't go to school. He found himself um, aligning himself with kids who didn't go to school.
Right.
The drug addicts, the drug dealers in our community were just bound and determined to get these little boys into selling drugs. It was bad. And I remember thinking, I have to help him. I got to do something to help this child.
Mhm.
And that was the first time I started looking at what was going on in the traditional public schools, and they had diminished so much in Washington D.C. And so I knew the parents needed something else. They needed to be able to put their children in schools that served them better or
Mhm.
served them well. And but there were very few choices. I mean,
Yeah.
you had private schools and you had public schools, and most of us couldn't afford private schools. But one day I decided, okay, I'm gonna get this boy in some school. I'm gonna get him out of this bad school
Right.
because he's getting in trouble and he's gonna go to jail if it was that bad. It was real bad.
Yeah.
And I went to this school and was able to get him enrolled, but I couldn't pay for it. And
Mhm.
I worked a couple of jobs, but I couldn't pay for it. And eventually I had to pull him out because I couldn't pay for it. And I remember thinking, actually, that little part in the movie, that's the hardest part for me to watch because I still remember those feelings of telling him he couldn't stay in the school where he was actually doing well.
Right.
But I remember thinking, no parent, no parent should ever have to suffer like
Right.
I did. Parents need to be provided with all kind of options for their children, and that was my first involvement with school choice and parental choice. Working with parents, finding out what we could do to make it work for our kids, and it was a struggle. It was hard.
Right. Because the reality is that people do have school choice, but it's only the ones that can afford it.
Exactly.
It's so it's
Right.
an income issue, and so like if you it's nice to talk about school choice and but and even some of the people who are anti-school choice, they have their kids in private schools
Yeah.
because they can afford it. And
Yeah.
they don't connect the dots that hey, not everyone can do this and isn't that an injustice?
Yeah. And
It
I always say when I'm speaking to groups, our legislators or people that are affluent that can't afford these private schools, I bring that up. And, I work with families that paying to go to school is just unheard of. Your kid goes to the school where they're assigned, and oftentimes those are some of the schools that are the worst in the cities, or and
yeah.
but they have no choice, and so it became just an obsession. I'm obsessed
So, and
with
you got
me.
excuse me, you got your school paid for by a donor, is that right? Or half of it, was it?
Yeah, my neighbor who saw something really good in my son said he would help pay for some of it, but it still wasn't enough,
Right.
you know. And he wasn't wealthy. He was, you know, a working class man, and he paid as much as he could, but it still wasn't enough,
Yeah.
And the school that we chose was they were they wanted to be paid,
Sure.
and they wanted all of it. They didn't want me and him doing little bits and pieces. They wanted all of it. So
Yeah. And
that made it
and a
difficult.
lot of times they charge less. You don't know how expensive public school is because, you don't have to pay that, but
Yeah,
a lot of
exactly.
times private schools are way lower in cost than public
Yeah,
schools. You just don't realize it because you don't have to pay it out of pocket. So you can save
exactly.
a lot of money um, if you could choose where to put that money a lot of times you can save the government money because you don't.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
that's what we've tried to do over the last 25 years,
Mhm.
and make sure that the money that's available for children to be educated goes the right way. Puts children in educational environments that truly work for them.
Right. So you started talking to friends, neighbors, and anyone you could about school choice and making a
I,
difference in
I
DC.
did.
Hmm.
I did. We had all those round table discussions with parents that lived in my community. I lived in a community that had a lot of single mothers and a lot of children. And we began to talk, and I found that many of them were having the same difficulties I was having, or and needed something different for their children, and we just started working together. We went to meetings, we went to board meetings where we were usually dismissed and not really listened to. And we went to community meetings. We put up a table in every place, like a festival or a celebration,
Hmm.
to talk to people about what they wanted for their children.
Right.
And eventually large groups of parents joined me
Yeah.
in speaking out on
How,
behalf of
how
their
long did
children.
it take you to get that momentum going?
It took a couple of years.
Mm.
So in 1998, a group of parents and I tried to get a scholarship program passed in Congress that people don't remember, but it was introduced by Jeff Flake. He was um, representative from Arizona. And so we worked hard to get this program passed, and we got it passed in the Senate, we got it passed in the House, and the president vetoed it.
Mm.
And so that was kind of our first
What
experience,
president was that again?
President Clinton,
Yeah.
which was hard for me because I'm from Arkansas, and uh,
And
and
were you a Democrat at the time or?
no,
Okay.
I I've never been a Democrat. I don't know
Okay.
where people get that from. I was independent. I was a Republican. I'm independent again. So
Okay.
I come from a state where black people were in the Republican Party for years.
Yeah.
My parents did not change parties until I was a teenager,
Mm.
and so it's strange, to talk about it, but
Mhm.
I always wanted my options open.
Yeah.
And somebody explained to me when I first time I ever voted that if you're independent, you can't vote in primaries, but you can vote for other people and people you like. So yeah,
Yeah.
so that's kind of my political history.
Right.
But
So when you compare the discrimination of the 50s and 60s to educational discrimination today, how does it look? Does it look different?
it in some ways I see the same kinds of things. Schools that don't really want to serve low income children. But of course, with school choice, we've been in so many programs around the country now. When I started, it was one, Milwaukee. And so to see school choice programs passed around the nation and more children going, it changed the landscape of what education is about for children. And that has really pleased me. And, but you still go into some situations and you wonder what those people are thinking about. How far back into the '60s can they go? In their thinking and their thought processes. It makes me very sad. I in my church, I represent a community of low income families,
Mm.
and we do a couple of mission programs in that community. So we've gotten very, very close to them. And I listen to the kids come in and talk, we ask them about school, and they come in to get snacks every Tuesday and Thursday or a book.
Mhm.
And I listen to them talk about how they don't go to school, how they get suspended, how nobody cares whether we learn or not. You're the only person that asks us questions, Miss Virginia or Miss Harrietta, my sister,
Mhm.
and uh, and it makes me sad because I'm seeing the same kinds of things happening now with particularly low income families
Mhm.
that I've seen forever.
Yeah,
And we had a child that came in yesterday. She goes to school 2 times a week. Somebody ought to notice.
right.
And so I said, well, what do they say? You got to have, a certain number of days you can't miss, or you can't miss a certain number of days. And she said, oh, they'll let me make it up. She's so nonchalant. We get
Right.
on her
Right.
every Tuesday, every time she comes into the church, we get on her about going to school. Or a
Mhm.
second grader came in yesterday who had been suspended for the fourth time, and he was suspended last week until after Christmas. So he's got a month-long vacation. How's he gonna learn? And
Yeah,
he's really smart.
right.
So, so it makes me feel that there's a lot of things that are still going on that are not serving our kids,
Right.
which makes me more obsessed
Yes.
about using my voice to make changes.
Right. Right. Like we don't, even with healthcare, we don't expect everyone to go to the same doctors. We don't expect
Exactly.
everyone to make the same choices, and the choice is actually what creates equality. What create, if we have the same choices, then we can create healthy competition that can
Yes.
drive in can drive the outcomes up for all students. And they've actually done research, and they've found that um, even kids who make no change are positively impacted by school choice because of the healthy competition that it creates. Where those
Yeah.
schools that have been in, operating by ideas that don't work, they have to make a choice to change or they'll get
Yeah.
left behind. And
Exactly.
kids will choose, families will choose better options. And so, yeah, I really think that the more we can choose. Now, it's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect, but it's
No.
going the whole choice, the idea of choice is better than the status quo of you have one monopoly
Yeah.
in education and you don't have any choices. That's doesn't really work in any other sector of society.
I know. And, you know, I, interestingly enough, we've seen families who had 3 kids and each child was in a different school. And each child was thriving because the parents sat down and really thought about what was best for their child,
Right.
and with charter schools,
Yeah.
and now with private school choice programs, I even see it more. I have a father that comes into our snack program. He, Arkansas has the Learns legislation, and it has a scholarship program, ESA program in it. And he got his child into that program, and she's at a school, a wonderful school, and is doing really well. Every time he comes in, he reminds me of how great his child, her name is Blessing, is
Mhm.
doing in school, and
Yeah.
how grateful he is for the opportunity to have the resources to put her in a school that works for her.
Yeah. And I love that you're still mentoring in your community. I mean, you've been a mother to so many people. And we talk about on this podcast about how to create significant cultural reform. And you just have done it with so much love. How did that, I mean, how did you do that? How did you express that to people and help them follow you?
Lee, um, I, I I'm blessed. I came from really great parents who told us that the best thing you do in life is serve others and love others. And so as I became an adult and had children and went through some turmoils of my own, and oftentimes there was nobody there to help me,
Mm,
and I would be very saddened by that. And but at some point I realized that people need somebody that's kind and loving, and I was gonna be that person.
Yep.
I love people, and I particularly love children, but
Mhm.
I love people.
Yeah.
And many times I've been yelled at and spoken ugly to in my career. I, I I don't think anybody should have to go through that. I don't think I should have had to go through that. So it just made me a better person. It made me a more compassionate person. I mean, I genuinely love what I do. I love talking to parents. I love working with kids. I always have.
Yeah.
And it changed. I think I was always okay, a nice person, but school choice and being involved with parents and hearing what they need and what they would like to do on behalf of their children
Mhm.
has changed me. It softened me. It made me want to understand how they were feeling. Sometimes a parent who is in the midst of turmoil with their children educationally, what they need is a shoulder to lean on. What
Yeah.
they need is a smile and a face that says it's going to be okay, but this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So I'm blessed. I think my mother, before she passed, she said, you are really a sweet person. You have a gift and use it. I said, yes, ma'am.
Well, yeah, and I can tell your faith comes through really strong there too. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
It yeah, I am serious about my relationship with God. I wish everybody could be, but
amen.
I am.
I am too. Yeah. So did you face I know in the Black community, school choice is pretty controversial. There's some
Mm.
that are really supportive and others probably not so much. And so did you face a lot of pushback in the Black community for standing up for school choice?
Oh, absolutely. I, the Congressional Black Caucus wouldn't even talk to me, and when they did, it was always in a very negative, not supportive way. And so, I learned early on how I was gonna be treated. I have people here in my home state of Little Rock that know how involved I am with school choice and know I support the governor who won't talk to me. And these are people I've known most of my life. And in the early years, it was even worse. People harassed me or harassed my children. It's been hard, and that's why I was saying it's really important if you if one takes on the role of doing what I've done to think about how you're going to do it and to think about how you're going to respond to people. I believe everybody has a right to their own opinion, but everybody should listen to mine as well. And in the beginning, people didn't like to debate me because I talked about children and parents and I could make them, according to them, I could make them look bad, and because I talked about children and children's needs, and
Yeah.
isn't that what they would want for their own families? When
Right.
President Obama became president, I wrote an op-ed, and in the op-ed, I was asking for his support for school choice because they made it very clear at the beginning of the administration that they wouldn't support us. And but in that op-ed, I wrote, I think a lot of you and Mrs. Obama. You made a choice to send your daughters to one of the best schools in D.C. Why take that away from other people?
Mm-hmm.
And I got a response. So but I
Right.
mean, but I believe that. I believe
Right.
that no matter what's going on, children need to be in places that work for them. And I mean, some of the people that have been the most vicious, especially in Congress to us, were people that their children were in private schools, and they
Right.
were like third generation
Right.
private school people. And And I always said that to them. You know, I know your children are in private school. I checked. And why take that away from our families?
Right. I've read
Never
a lot of
understood.
yeah, I've read a lot of Thomas Sowell, and he talks about how a lot of the what we call racial issues are really income issues. And if we can solve
Yeah.
the income gap, then we will level the playing field for all kinds of minorities and all, white people too that are poor,
Yeah.
that need that
Exactly.
leg up. That he said that's the best way with education is to just solve that income gap.
Oh, I agree with him. And just for the record, we never 90% of our kids were African American, but there was another 20% that were white,
Hmm.
Asian,
Yeah.
um, all kinds of people.
Yeah.
So we never limited our fight to just fighting for black kids. We fought for
Right.
every single child to
Yes.
have an opportunity to get an education, an
Yeah.
appropriate and strong education. And I remember a mother came to one of our events, and she just happened to be white. And she walked in, and she and I were talking, and she said, "I'm poor as a church mouse. I need this for my children as well." And I said, "Absolutely." And I think she was surprised that she was welcomed,
Right.
and my I have always said from the beginning, I serve every child, period.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it's about.
It
Right.
is. Yes.
So, so how did this? Now, I know your son was the one that the reason you did this, right? And my third born son too. He's in the throes of the teenage years. It can be
Well,
difficult sometimes.
it can
But
be.
so how was he impacted by his school choice?
When he went to private school, he was doing so well. And unfortunately, I had to take him out. But then we found a charter school that worked well for him. And he actually graduated valedictorian from this charter school.
That's amazing.
And but he and I were talking about it recently, and he said, "Mama, if it weren't for your fighting so hard for me, I'm not sure if I would make it, have made it."
Yeah.
He went to the Marine Corps. He served for several years,
Mm.
and he works for the UPS. He's been working for UPS for 10 years, which is a perfect job for him. And he just bought a home, and he's single with no children. And he's just got a great life.
Yeah.
And he recognizes that hadn't had not been for the fight, that none of our lives
Yeah.
would have been
Yeah.
as wonderful as we have seen.
Yes.
I'm not rich. I've struggled, but I love my life, and I love the people that I've been able to meet and get to know, you and many others. And I love that, people believe in me.
Hmm. Yeah.
I do.
And that is the part that made me cry in your book because I thought this is the kid that you were concerned would be on the street if he didn't get into a different school, that he would be
Yeah,
dealing with drugs or whatever it was.
made
And
me cry.
and he just rose to the top when given that opportunity. And that's
He
incredible.
did.
I mean, I was one of those kids, like I said, when I was in the LA Unified Public School District, it sucked the life out of me. And I really don't know what would have happened to me if my mom hadn't been able to work at a private school and gotten me out of there.
Uh,
And, I might be a completely different person today. So yeah.
Absolutely.
And
And it,
you can't wait for things to change. You can't,
no.
and you go to school board meetings, you do all you can do. And even teachers, there are great teachers in public schools.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes they can't fix
They
everything.
no. And I've had teachers say to me, "Get him out of this school." You
Mm,
know,
wow.
get him somewhere, find some place. And then what people didn't realize during the legislative fight, behind the scenes were many, many teachers And my parents were public school teachers. Three of my four sisters were public school teachers,
Mhm.
and they wanted to teach. They wanted kids to learn, but their arms were tied. They were afraid to say anything out loud.
Yeah.
But during the legislative fight, we had a great support from public school teachers. A lot of those signs people see in pictures were done at my house late at night by teachers
Wow.
who could not speak out in the light. And that always made me sad.
Right.
But but we have to continue to make sure that one, we rise up teachers, two, we make it where they can teach,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and I think things will change a great deal. With school choice, we've seen amazing things. We've seen teachers go off to other schools that were really struggling at traditional public schools.
Mhm.
I support every delivery system, including public school, and but I support schools that work for
Yes.
kids. I mean,
Yes.
there are public schools that have amazing programs. Parents will line up around the block to get their kids in those schools. But
Mhm.
on the other hand, there are schools in some of the poorer communities that should be closed,
Yeah.
and nobody should have to endure what the children do
Right.
at those schools. So, what I want is quality education. What I want is every family, every child, every American child to have the right to a quality education.
Yeah.
Period.
Yep. So you started out, early on, going into an integrated school, fighting for the right to go to a public school.
I know
And now you're fighting for the right to go to any school, and that's amazing.
exactly.
It,
I
it's
used it fascinates me because I used to tell the one person that always supported us was Representative Elijah Cummings.
Mm,
Even though he wouldn't do it publicly, he did it privately and with me. And
mm,
he would say, we're fighting the same fight. We just have to fight it differently. He
mm.
was an amazing man.
Wow.
And so I look, and he and I used to joke. We fought for 40 years to get into public schools. Now we fighting to get out of public schools. Isn't that ironic?
Yeah.
So, that's like a inside joke with a lot of older
Yeah.
school choice advocates.
Yeah.
And this is weird.
You think,
So
yeah, because you think about your detractors and you think about all the people who, you know, have to just wave the banner of institutionalism, I guess, like it's all
mhm.
about the institution. But do you think there are a lot of uh, like closet school choice people?
I I actually do. And I've had a number of people who publicly wouldn't even talk to me, who privately have said, I really admire the work you're doing, and
Oh,
I wish I could do more.
mm,
So there are a lot of people, but like you said, institutional thinking,
mm. Yeah.
and they need jobs, and and
Right.
and it's just sad to think that if somebody speaks out differently from what um what the traditional public schools have done, that they would risk their jobs, but they do.
And it's
And
sad to me that
my
they don't have the courage to do that because because we could
they
make a real difference, I think, if more people spoke out.
yeah, it would be, and I wish they did, but it's been this country has had rough times, and people have been hurt and taken through all kind of changes, and unfortunately, in some cases, when people find the courage to speak out, they get beat up. I did. I got totally, beat up, and terrible things said about me. And
Mm,
at one point, somebody said that it would be best if I didn't exist, and so we had to get somebody to protect me and my children. There were times during the legislative fight when I just couldn't believe how awful people were to the parents and myself, and
mm,
and and it sometimes it got scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying to my kids one time, if y'all want me to stop doing this, I will.
Mm-hmm.
And because they are my top priority.
Right.
And the kids said, and I was so proud of them. They said, "No, Mama, you're fighting for the children. You're
Yeah.
fighting for us, and for all our friends and all the children. You don't have to stop. We're gonna be okay." And
Right.
even now, they're as adults, as older adults, actually, they talk about that.
Yeah.
They talk about the courage it took me and many, many others to stand and speak out,
Yeah.
understanding that we could be treated badly.
Right. And I think there are bad ways to when you provoke people, they're going to be mean back to you and all that, but when you're hitting on something that's really powerful, and when you're threatening the powers that be, you're going to
Yep,
have enemies, and
yep,
you're going to you're going to wake the sleeping giant, right? And
exactly.
it's just inevitable that you're going to do
It,
that. So I think if you
it
don't
is
have any enemies, you're probably not doing much.
exactly. Well, initially it scared me. Then later on, after I grew a little bit stronger, I realized that all these people is going around hating on me, as the children would say, uh, are just mad because their voices are not being heard, and that there are changes that are occurring. So it changed even for me. But initially, I wasn't a speaker. I wasn't a person that went out and provoked any kind of discussion anytime. I was pretty quiet and trying to live my life with my children. And it just became very clear to me. Well, God said, "Girl, you need to get out and do something," and I did. And as frightening as it would get sometimes, I'm really proud of the work that we've done over the years.
Yeah. And all the lives you've impacted, I mean, there are kids whose lives will never be the same, and
Thank
families'
you.
lives will never be the same. And I think, if you talk to somebody here who is listening and who's like, I want to create reform in some way, but I'm scared because I know the price that I'll have to pay for it. What would you say to somebody like that?
I would say use your voice,
Hmm.
make changes. The fears are something that will certainly be there, but the what you get later is amazing. When you realize that you've gone through the fire and that you've spoken up and that you've used your voice and that you've made a difference in this world, the rewards are incredible.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I'm semi-retired, and sometimes I think about the work that we've done over the year, and I think, would I not have done it had I known? I would have done it tenfold. I would have worked to fight for children tenfold. I
Right.
would have. I wouldn't change anything about the work that was done, standing alongside courageous parents,
Mhm.
wonderful people
Yeah.
who wanted the same thing
I mean, you went to DC like every day. Like you went to the Capitol every day, didn't you,
every day.
for a while? I mean, you were persistent. And it must have built something in you that you never even knew was there, probably.
You're absolutely right. I was persistent, and some members of Congress would probably say I was annoying, but I just believe that if we didn't go up there and speak out, then nobody would hear us. And the rumors that were going around that said low income parents or parents that have no choice or parents that live in certain parts of the city will never fight for their children. We had to dispel that. We had to say,
Right.
oh, y'all just don't know. And every day when we went to Capitol Hill to talk to members of the House or members of the Senate, you know, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. And even if some people's minds we couldn't change, we did change a lot of minds,
Mhm.
and that in itself made us stronger. We were soldiers, we were
Right.
warriors, we fought.
And I'm sure that, yeah, that did something to you, that changed you, that is priceless. Yeah. So, it's just inspiring to know it's not about the education level you have. It's not about the money you have. It's not about the connections you have, because you really didn't have much of any of that, did you?
No.
You had, you just had love, perseverance, hard work, and to know because of your faith that anything is possible. Yeah. Wow. Well, I wanted to also, while we're on this podcast, I wanted to share a little bit about what we're doing here in Alaska with Alaska School Choice. We have a nonprofit called Alaska School Choice, and we are celebrating National School Choice Week. We have two events coming up. One's on January 26th at the beginning of National School Choice Week. We're celebrating with an Alaska Student Shine Assembly. So it's the first one ever that we're going to do in the Valley, and we're going to pull together schools and educational groups, homeschoolers, to just showcase the students, because that's what it's all about. So we're going to have an hour-long program there, and then we're going to have our annual expo that we've had every year. It's going to be at the Alaska Native Heritage Center in Anchorage on the 31st. So if you're nearby, we'd love to have you join in. If you're an educational vendor, get signed up to be a part of that. And we're excited this year. We're giving away book scholarships. It's the first year that we're going to give away a number of different scholarships. Where our goal is about 30, maybe 30 to 50 scholarships. If we can, we'll give away more. But we're giving it to kids of all kinds of educational backgrounds, whether it's public, private, homeschool, or hybrid situations. We just thought if we can at least give them a way to get books, that's going to help them. Or maybe they're struggling in math, let's say, and they need like an online teacher or whatever. We want to help them get ahead. So if you'd like to be a member and support that, what we're doing, you can go to alaskaschoolchoice.com. You can donate either as an individual or as an organization. And so, I'm not sure if you've heard, I'm sure you have, Virginia, about the tax credits from the Big Beautiful Bill that's coming our way. That's really exciting. It's going to be, I believe in 2027 you're going to be able to get a tax rebate by donating to a scholarship granting organization if your state opts into that. So we're hoping that Alaska opts into that, and that we as Alaska School Choice can be one of those scholarship granting organizations that can take donor dollars and be able to turn them into school choice funds for long term, so we can open up opportunities for families that wouldn't have those opportunities. And some of those families are special needs families, because in our state, there's really no way you can go to a different school and get the same level of funding that you do in the public school for special ed. So that's just one demographic that really could be helped by school choice. So I think I'm really optimistic. I think there's great things ahead for school choice, and that we have to just keep talking about it and have conversations.